The knock hit my door like she was trying to break it. Not knock. Slam. Again. Again. I hadn't even set the last box down. Open this door right now. Her voice cut through the hallway before I reached the handle. Sharp. Controlled. Too loud for something that didn't make sense. I opened it halfway. She was already mid-sentence, eyes locked on me like I'd just committed a crime. Blonde hair perfect. White Lexus idling behind her. Clipboard in hand. You can't live here, she snapped. No greeting. No hesitation. Just authority. Or something pretending to be it. That's when I noticed the paper she was holding wasn't official. Not really. It looked right at a glance. But something was off. This property falls under HOA enforcement, she continued, shoving the paper forward. Her nails tapped the page like punctuation. You need to sign compliance forms immediately or face penalties. Penalties. For a house I just closed on yesterday. I glanced past her. 2 neighbors had stopped walking. One had a phone out. Watching. Waiting. That part didn't feel random. I'm not part of your HOA, I said. Calm. Flat. Her smile didn't change. It tightened. Just slightly. Everyone here is, she said. Too fast. Like she'd said it 100 times before. That's when it clicked. Rehearsed. She stepped closer without asking. Perfume hit first. Strong. Artificial. It lingered longer than it should have. You're out of compliance already, she added. We'll start fines today. Fines. Already. I looked down at the paper again. Same formatting. Same logos. But the boundary line printed at the bottom, that wasn't accurate. Not even close. That detail shouldn't have been wrong. Not for something like this. You need to sign, she pressed. Louder now. Making sure the neighbors heard. I could feel the shift behind her. People watching like something was about to happen. Like they'd seen this before. That part bothered me more than her voice. Show me jurisdiction, I said. Just that. Nothing else. Her pen stopped moving. For half a second. Then she laughed. Loud. Forced. You don't get to question HOA authority, she snapped. There it was again. Authority. Claimed. Not proven. Something. About the way she said it didn't sit right. Like she needed me to believe it. Needed everyone to believe it. She turned slightly, making sure the audience caught every word. If you refuse, I'll escalate this, she said. Her phone was already in her hand. Screen lit. Ready. Too ready. That's when I noticed something else. The map on her paper didn't just include my house. It extended past the subdivision line. Past the legal boundary. Past where it should have stopped. That wasn't a mistake. Not a small one. She hit call without breaking eye contact. Yes, I need an officer here, she said, voice shifting instantly. Controlled again. Polished. We have a trespasser refusing to comply. Trespasser. In my own doorway. The word hung there for a second. Heavy. Wrong. A siren echoed somewhere in the distance. Faint. Getting closer. Her smile came back. Wider this time. Like she'd already decided how this ends. I didn't move. Didn't argue. Just watched her. Watched the paper. Watched the boundary line she thought I wouldn't notice. That's when I realized exactly what she was doing. The sirens got louder, bouncing off the houses like they belonged here. She lowered her phone slowly, eyes still locked on me, that same confident smile sitting on her face like nothing could shake it. I could hear gravel crunch behind her as one of the neighbors shifted position, trying to get a better angle. That part felt staged. Like I had stepped into something already in motion. I leaned against the doorframe, arms loose, breathing steady. The paper in her hand caught the sunlight again, and that boundary line still bothered me. It was not just wrong. It was deliberate. I had seen county maps for years. Lines do not drift like that by accident. Last chance, she said, tapping the clipboard again. The sound was sharp. Repetitive. Almost practiced. Sign the agreement or you will be removed. Removed. The word sat there for a second. Too heavy for something she could actually enforce. That was the problem. She believed she could. I glanced down the street. Same houses. Same trimmed lawns. Everything looked uniform. Too uniform. That detail had not clicked before. My house sat just outside that pattern. Same style. Same spacing. But technically separate. That difference was invisible unless you knew where to look. Most people would not. She was counting on that. That realization settled in quietly. This was not random. Not personal either. It was systematic. You just moved in, right? She said, voice shifting again, softer now, almost sympathetic. People get confused about boundaries all the time. That tone did not match the situation. It felt like a script change. I nodded once. No words. Let her keep talking. She took a step back, gesturing toward the street like she owned it. This entire section falls under community governance, she continued. We maintain standards here. Standards. That word again. It sounded clean. Reasonable. But the map said otherwise. That map said she was reaching beyond what she controlled. I could feel eyes on me from both sides now. Windows slightly open. Curtains barely moving. People were listening. Waiting to see how this played out. That part mattered more than the paperwork. You do not want to make this harder, she added. There was a hint of pressure under the calm. Subtle. Intentional. Like she had done this enough times to know exactly when to push. A patrol car turned the corner at the end of the block. Slow. Controlled. Lights flashing but no siren now. The timing was almost perfect. Too perfect. She straightened her posture immediately. Shoulders back. Chin up. The performance shifted again. I watched her adjust in real time. That detail told me more than anything she said. This was not about rules. It was about control. I looked back at the paper one more time. The boundary line cut across my property like it belonged there. But it did not. Not legally. Not even close. I had seen the original survey myself 2 weeks ago. Clean lines. Clear separation. No overlap. No ambiguity. That memory came back sharp. The closing table. The documents. The signatures. Everything precise. Everything verified. Which meant one thing. This paper was not just wrong. It was designed to look right to the wrong audience. The officer stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt as he approached. Calm. Neutral. He glanced at her first, then at me. She did not hesitate. Officer, this man is refusing to comply with HOA regulations and trespassing on community property, she said, voice steady, confident, rehearsed. I could hear the certainty in it. Like she had said those exact words before. The officer shifted his gaze to me. Waiting. Measuring. The air felt still for a second. Too still. I reached for the folder sitting just inside my doorway, fingers brushing the edge of the documents I had not planned to use this soon. That is when I realized she had already gone too far. I slid the folder into my hand before stepping out onto the porch, the wood creaking under my weight just enough to break the silence. The officer's eyes tracked the movement immediately, calm but alert, like he had seen this kind of situation before but had not decided which side it belonged to yet. Linda shifted closer to him, just half a step, but it was enough to look like alignment. That detail did not go unnoticed. "Sir," the officer said, voice even, "I need to understand what is going on here." His tone was neutral, but his posture leaned slightly toward her. That was expected. She had called first. She controlled the narrative, at least for now. "He is refusing to comply with established community regulations," Linda said quickly, holding the clipboard higher like it carried weight. "And he is occupying property that falls under our jurisdiction." There it was again. That word. Jurisdiction. She used it with confidence, but not precision. That difference matters more than most people realize. I stepped forward just enough to close the distance without crowding anyone. The sun hit the edge of the documents in my hand, and for a second, the official seals caught the light. The officer noticed. His eyes flicked down, then back up to my face. Small shift. Important shift. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice level, "this property is not part of their association." I did not raise my voice. I did not rush. The street stayed quiet. Too quiet. Linda let out a short laugh, shaking her head like she had heard something ridiculous. "That is simply not true," she said. "He just moved in. He does not understand how this area works." That phrasing again. Not facts. Framing. She was not arguing the law. She was shaping perception. That told me everything I needed to know. The officer looked between us, weighing the two versions. I could see the moment he realized something did not line up. It was subtle. A slight pause. A small shift of his stance. He was no longer leaning toward her. "Do you have documentation?" he asked. That question changed the entire dynamic. Linda opened her mouth first, already lifting her clipboard. Too fast. Too eager. "Yes, we have full HOA authority over this section," she said, flipping a page like she was about to present something official. But she hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I stepped in before she could recover. "I do," I said, opening my folder carefully. No sudden moves. Just paper. Clean. Organized. The officer's attention shifted fully now. Linda's smile tightened again. I could feel the tension building, not loud, not chaotic, but sharp. Like something precise was about to snap into place. I pulled out the survey first. Clean lines. Certified markings. County stamp clear in the corner. I held it where the officer could see without stepping too close. "This is the recorded boundary survey filed with the county," I said. "My property line ends here." I traced the line with my finger. Slow. Deliberate. "Their association boundary ends here." I tapped a separate line. Clear gap between the two. No overlap. No confusion. The officer leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to show he was actually reading it. Linda did not look at the paper. Not once. That was the tell. "That document is outdated," she said quickly. Too quickly. "We have updated community zoning that includes this parcel." Updated. That word hung in the air. It sounded official. But she did not provide anything to support it. Not yet. I reached into the folder again, fingers brushing the second document I had not planned to reveal this early. That is when I noticed something in her expression shift for the first time. Her eyes flicked to the folder in my hand, just for a second, then back to the officer. That was the first real crack. Small, but it was there. You cannot rely on outdated county filings, she said, voice tightening just enough to lose that polished edge. Our association has updated jurisdiction under community expansion guidelines. Guidelines. Not law. The officer caught that too. His head tilted slightly, like he was separating words from meaning. That distinction matters more than most people think. I pulled the second document free, letting the paper unfold slowly. No rush. No sudden movement. The seal at the top was darker. Federal. Hard to miss once you see it. The air shifted. Not loudly. Just enough. Linda's posture stiffened, shoulders locking in place like she was bracing for something she did not fully understand yet. That reaction told me she had not seen this before. This is the recorded exemption attached to the original subdivision filing, I said, holding it steady. Filed before the HOA was even established. The officer leaned in closer now. Not toward her. Toward the document. That shift was quiet, but final. Exemption, he repeated. Simple question. Honest. Linda did not answer. Not immediately. That silence stretched just a little too long. I pointed to the highlighted section, the language clean and precise. No ambiguity. No room for interpretation. Parcel 17B remains permanently outside any future association governance, I read aloud. Including expansions, annexations, or administrative claims. The word sat there. Heavy. Clear. Unavoidable. Linda finally stepped forward, her heels clicking sharp against the concrete. That clause does not apply anymore, she said, voice rising just a notch. We have restructured the community boundaries. Restructured. Another soft word for something much bigger. The officer straightened slightly, eyes moving between the two documents now. One hand rested near his belt, not tense, just grounded. He was thinking. You could see it. Do you have documentation for that restructuring? He asked. Calm. Direct. The question landed harder than anything I had said. Linda opened her clipboard again, flipping pages faster this time. The sound of paper snapped in the quiet air. Too fast. Too sharp. We have internal records, she said. Board approvals. Meeting minutes. Internal. That word echoed in my head. Not filed. Not recorded. Not enforceable beyond their own group. That difference is everything in property law. The officer waited. Silent. Expecting something official. Something he could actually verify. Nothing came. Just more pages. More movement. No proof. I watched her carefully. The confidence was still there, but it had shifted. Less control. More urgency. Those documents would need to be filed with the county to affect property boundaries, I said, keeping my voice even. Not aggressive. Just factual. Otherwise, they do not extend jurisdiction. The officer glanced at me again, longer this time. Not suspicion. Recognition. That detail mattered. Linda's jaw tightened. Just enough to show strain. He is misrepresenting the situation, she snapped, pointing toward me again. He is trying to avoid compliance. Avoid. Another framing word. Not accurate. Not precise. I lowered the document slightly, letting the silence stretch. No need to fill it. The truth was already doing the work. The officer exhaled slowly, shifting his stance again. Not toward her. Not fully toward me either. Just balanced now. Neutral. But informed. That was the difference. Linda noticed it too. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. That was new. That had not been there before. The neighbors were still watching. Phones still raised. The street still quiet. But the energy had changed. Subtle. Irreversible. I tapped the bottom of the exemption document once, right where the signature line sat. Clean. Verified. Recorded. This was filed with the county and referenced in every subsequent transfer, I said. Including my purchase. That detail landed heavier than the rest. It connected everything. Past to present. Intent to enforcement. Linda's hand tightened around the clipboard, knuckles pale against the plastic edge. She took a breath like she was about to say something else, something stronger, something that might pull control back. But she stopped. Just for a second. And in that second, something shifted again. She inhaled slowly, like she was recalibrating in real time, then forced a smile back onto her face, thinner now, less convincing. Even if that exemption existed, she said, voice tighter, the community still has the right to enforce standards that affect surrounding property values. Property values. That was the pivot. Not law. Not jurisdiction. Influence. The officer did not respond right away. He glanced down at the document again, then at the street behind her, then back to me. He was connecting pieces now. That part was clear. Ma'am, he said finally, measured, standards are not the same as legal authority. The sentence landed softly, but it cut through everything she had been building. Linda's expression flickered again. Quick. Almost invisible. But it was there. The confidence she walked up with was starting to fracture at the edges. She shifted her weight, heels scraping slightly against the concrete, a sound that felt louder than it should have. The neighbors had not moved. Phones still raised. No one stepping in. Just watching. That detail stayed with me. This was not new to them. He is disrupting the community, she insisted, pushing forward again, trying to regain control of the narrative. We have rules for a reason. Rules. Not laws. The officer exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing just enough to show he was done entertaining general statements. Do those rules apply to his property? He asked. Direct. Simple. No room to redirect. Linda opened her mouth, then paused. That pause stretched just a fraction too long. She looked down at her clipboard again, flipping pages that suddenly felt empty. The sound of paper snapping echoed in the quiet street. Still nothing solid. He is within our extended boundary, she said finally, but her voice lacked the same weight now. It sounded thinner. Less certain. I did not interrupt. I did not need to. The silence around her was doing more than any argument I could make. The officer turned back to me. And you are saying your property is exempt from that boundary entirely? He asked. His tone was not confrontational. It was precise. He was building a clear record in his head. Yes, I said. One word. Clean. I tapped the exemption document again, just once. No emphasis needed. The ink and seal spoke for themselves. The officer nodded slightly, then looked at Linda again. That shift mattered. It was no longer her leading the situation. She could feel it too. Her grip tightened on the clipboard, plastic edges pressing into her palm. We have been enforcing this boundary for years, she said, voice rising again, reaching for authority through repetition. Everyone here complies. Everyone. That word echoed across the street. Broad. Sweeping. Convenient. But it also revealed something else. A pattern. A system that had been operating without challenge. Until now. The officer glanced down the street again, this time slower, taking in the uniform houses, the quiet observers, the subtle tension hanging in the air. He was seeing it now. Not just this moment. The pattern behind it. Past enforcement does not establish legal jurisdiction, he said calmly. That sentence shifted everything. Linda's face tightened fully now. No mask left to adjust. No tone to soften it. Just pressure. Real pressure. She stepped closer again, lowering her voice, trying a different approach. "Officer, we are just trying to maintain order here," she said. Softer. Controlled. Almost reasonable. But it came too late. The shift had already happened. I watched her carefully. The way she changed tone. The way she moved between authority and persuasion. It was not random. It was practiced. Which meant she had done this before. Many times. That realization settled in quietly. He was not the first. Just the first to push back. The officer looked at me one more time, then at the documents, then back at her. The balance had tipped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. "At this point," he said, steady and clear, "this appears to be a civil matter without enforceable violation." The words landed like a line drawn in the sand. Linda did not respond immediately. She just stood there, eyes locked on the paper in my hand like it had rewritten something she thought was fixed. The street stayed silent. The neighbors did not move. And in that stillness, something much bigger than this moment started to take shape. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Civil matter. No violation. It sounded simple, but it stripped everything she had built down to nothing. Linda did not move at first. Her eyes stayed locked on the document in my hand like it had betrayed her personally. Then she blinked, once, slow, and the smile came back. Not the same one. This one was thinner. Sharper. "That is not correct," she said, voice lower now, controlled again, but something underneath it had shifted. The officer did not react. He just waited. That silence forced her to keep talking. "Our association has legal counsel," she continued. "We have filed expansions before. This is no different." Filed. That word again. But she still had not shown anything. Not one stamped document. Not one recorded map. Just statements. I watched the way her hand tightened around the clipboard again. Small movement. Tension building. The officer glanced at me briefly, then back to her. "Ma'am," he said, steady, "if there are recorded filings, you can provide them through the proper channels. But at this moment, I do not see grounds for enforcement." That was the second line drawn. Clear. Firm. Linda's jaw set harder this time. She shifted her stance, turning slightly toward the neighbors, like she was adjusting the audience instead of the argument. That detail mattered. She was not just trying to win here. She was trying to maintain control over perception. "This will not end here," she said, louder now, making sure everyone heard it. The tone carried. Sharp. Public. A warning, not just to me. To anyone watching. That part landed differently. The neighbors did not react. Not outwardly. But I could see it in the stillness. They had heard that tone before. The officer straightened slightly, one hand resting calmly near his belt again. Not defensive. Just grounded. "You are free to pursue this through civil court," he said. "But there is no immediate action required here." The statement settled everything in that moment. No escalation. No removal. No authority exercised. Linda exhaled slowly, then looked back at me. This time, there was no attempt to hide it. Just calculation. Pure and direct. "You think this paper protects you," she said quietly. No audience now. Just Me. You have no idea how this community works. The words were soft, but they carried more weight than anything she had said before. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just certain. That certainty did not come from the document. It came from something else. Something established long before I arrived. I did not respond. I just watched her. Watched the way she held that certainty even after everything had shifted. That told me more than anything else. The officer glanced between us one last time, then gave a small nod. If there is nothing else, he said, stepping back toward his car. No rush. No urgency. Just closure. At least for him. The patrol car door opened with a soft click. The engine idled low. Red and blue lights still reflecting faintly off the windows of the houses. Linda stepped back from the porch, heels clicking again, slower this time. Measured. Controlled. She adjusted her clipboard, smoothing the papers like she was resetting something internally. Then she turned without another word. The white Lexus door shut with a muted thud. Engine started. Smooth. Quiet. She pulled away slowly, not looking back. The street remained still for a few seconds after she left. Too still. Then one by one, the neighbors lowered their phones. Curtains shifted. Doors closed. Like a scene ending. But it did not feel finished. Not even close. I stood there for a moment, the document still in my hand, the exemption line still clear under the sunlight. Everything had gone exactly as the law said it should. Clean. Logical. Controlled. And yet something about the way she said those last words stayed with me. Not as a threat. Not exactly. More like a fact I had not accounted for yet. I stepped back inside, closing the door slowly behind me. The house was quiet again. Empty. Boxes still unpacked. But the silence felt different now. Heavier. Like the line she tried to cross was not the only one that mattered. That is when I realized this was never just about the boundary. The house felt too quiet once the door clicked shut behind me. Not peaceful. Controlled. Like the silence was waiting to see what I would do next. I set the folder down on the kitchen counter, the paper edges still. Warm from the sun. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. I walked to the window slowly, careful not to make it obvious. The street looked normal again. Lawns trimmed. Driveways empty. But one thing had changed. No one was outside anymore. Not a single person. That kind of timing does not happen by accident. I watched the corner where the patrol car had disappeared. Nothing moved. No sound. Just still air and closed doors. That was the first real sign. This was not over. I turned back toward the counter and opened the folder again, flipping past the exemption document to the original survey. Clean lines. Verified coordinates. Everything exactly where it should be. But something about the way Linda reacted kept pulling at me. It was not shock. Not confusion. It was recognition. Like she had seen this kind of pushback before. That detail did not sit right. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the digital copy of the boundary map I had saved during closing. The lines were clear. The gap between my property and the HOA boundary was small, but intentional. Too precise to ignore. Which meant someone had to know it was there. And if she knew, then why push so hard anyway? That question lingered longer than it should have. I tapped through a few more files, pulling up the subdivision history I had downloaded weeks ago. Dates. Filings. Amendments. Everything looked standard at first glance. But then I noticed something buried in the timeline. A filing 3 years ago. Minor adjustment. No details attached. Just a reference number. That was unusual. Adjustments that affect boundaries usually come with supporting documents. Maps. Surveys. Something recorded. This had none of that. Just a number and a date. That was not how this normally works. I leaned closer to the screen, reading the line again. Same result. No attachments. No clarification. That kind of gap is not an oversight. It is a placeholder. A move without visibility. I stepped back from the counter and glanced toward the front door again. Still quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows something rehearsed. I walked to the hallway and paused, listening. Nothing inside. Nothing outside. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of something settling in the walls. That silence felt different now. Heavier. Intentional. I went back to the counter and pulled up the county site, typing in the reference number slowly. The page loaded, then stalled for a second longer than expected. When it finally opened, the screen showed the same entry. Same date. Same reference. Still no attachments. But this time, there was a note at the bottom. Small. Easy to miss. Pending supplemental documentation. Pending. For 3 years. That does not happen unless something is being held back. Or avoided. I stared at that line for a moment, the words sitting there like they were not supposed to be noticed. That was the second real sign. Whatever she was enforcing was not fully recorded. Not fully legal. But still active. Which meant something else was making it work. Something beyond paperwork. I closed the file slowly and looked back toward the window again. Still nothing outside. No movement. No sound. Just the same controlled stillness. But now it made sense. This was not about expanding a boundary. It was about maintaining something that was never officially allowed in the first place. And the fact that it had lasted this long meant one thing. Someone had been letting it happen. I kept staring at that pending note like it was going to change if I blinked. It did not. 3 years without documentation is not a delay. It is a gap someone is protecting. I leaned back against the counter, folding my arms slowly, letting the timeline settle in my head. 3 years ago. That lined up too cleanly with something else. I pulled up the property transfer records again and scrolled through the past ownership changes. Names. Dates. Signatures. Routine at first. Then one name appeared more than once. Linda Whitmore. Not as an owner. As a witness. That detail stopped me. HOA presidents do not usually sign off on private transfers unless they are inserting themselves into the process. That was not normal. I tapped the screen again, zooming in on the signatures. Same handwriting style. Same date pattern. She had been present at multiple closings in this area. Not just involved. Embedded. That changed the picture completely. I moved to the dining table and spread the papers out, aligning the survey with the digital map on my phone. The boundary line stayed consistent across every official document. Clean. Untouched. But that adjustment filing sat right on top of that line in the timeline. No documents. No attachments. Just presence. That is not how legal expansion works. It is how control expands without documentation. I walked back to the window again, slower this time. Still no movement outside. But now I noticed something else. One curtain across the street shifted just slightly. Not enough for someone to step out. Just enough to keep watching without being seen. That told me everything about how this neighborhood operated. Quiet compliance. Observed, not spoken. I stepped back from the window and picked up my phone again, pulling up the county contact page. If there was a filing, someone had processed it. Or at least logged it. I dialed the clerk's office and put the phone on speaker, letting it ring. The sound filled the room, sharp against the silence. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then a voice answered. Calm. Routine. I gave the reference number and waited. Keyboard clicks echoed faintly through the line. Then a pause. Longer than expected. That pause mattered. That file is marked incomplete, the clerk said. There are no submitted documents attached to the reference. I nodded slowly, even though she could not see me. Was anything ever submitted? I asked. Another pause. Papers shifting this time. There is a note indicating a review request was initiated, she said. But it was never finalized. Never finalized. That phrase locked everything into place. You cannot enforce a boundary that was never approved. Not legally. Not officially. But somehow, it had been happening anyway. Who initiated the review? I asked. There was a brief silence on the other end. Not hesitation. Just checking. Then she answered. The request was submitted under a community association representative. She stopped there. Did not say the name. Did not need to. I already knew. I thanked her and ended the call, setting the phone down. Carefully. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls were holding something in. I looked back at the papers spread across the table. Every official document said the same thing. My property was outside their reach. Completely. Permanently. But reality outside did not match that. Not even close. That meant enforcement here was not coming from law. It was coming from something else. Something sustained. Something protected. I walked to the front door and rested my hand on the handle for a second, feeling the cool metal under my palm. The silence on the other side felt heavier now. Not empty. Watching. That is when a new thought settled in. If this had been going on for years, and no one had challenged it successfully, then there was a reason for that. And I had just stepped directly into it. I did not open the door right away. I stood there for a second, hand still on the handle, replaying everything in my head. The filing. The missing documents. Her name tied to multiple closings. None of that was accidental. This was structure. Quiet. Invisible. But consistent. I turned the lock slowly and opened the door just enough to look outside. The air felt still again. Too still. Then I saw him. Across the street. Older guy. Late 60s maybe. Standing by his mailbox like he had nowhere else to be. But he was watching me. Not directly. Just enough to stay aware. That kind of attention is not casual. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me this time. No reason to hide it. If they were watching, let them watch. The boards creaked under my weight again. Same sound as before. Same spot. But this time it felt louder. He noticed. His head turned slightly. Not startled. Just acknowledging. Morning, I said, keeping it simple. Neutral. He hesitated before answering. That pause told me more than the word itself. Morning, he replied. His voice was low. Careful. Like he was measuring every syllable. I stepped down one step, not too close, not too far. Been here long? I asked. Casual on the surface. Not really casual underneath. He nodded once. 22 years, he said. That number landed. Long enough to see patterns. Long enough to know how things actually work. Then you have seen how this runs, I said. Not a question. More like placing a piece on the table. His eyes shifted briefly toward the corner where Linda's car had disappeared earlier. Then back to me. That glance was quick. But it said everything. People follow the rules, he said. Simple. Clean. But not complete. I waited. Did not fill the silence. After a second, he added, quieter this time, it is easier that way. Easier. Not right. Not legal. Just easier. That distinction mattered. I stepped down another step, closer now. Even when those rules are not enforceable. I asked. He looked at me fully for the first time. Really looked. There was something there. Not fear exactly. But caution. Deep caution. You are new, he said. Not answering. Deflecting. That confirmed it. He knew. I spoke with the county, I said. That adjustment filing was never completed. His jaw tightened slightly. Small movement. But real. Does not change how things work here, he replied. That sentence hit harder than anything Linda had said. Because it was not a threat. It was acceptance. I let that sit for a second. Then I pulled the folded copy of the survey from my pocket and held it out just enough for him to see. This line is clear, I said. There is no overlap. He did not look at the paper. Not once. That told me everything. He did not need to. He already knew. Lines on paper do not stop pressure, he said quietly. Pressure. There it was. Not authority. Not law. Pressure. Sustained. Repeated. Until people comply. I glanced down the street again. Same closed doors. Same stillness. But now it made sense. This was not enforced through legal means. It was enforced through consistency. Through expectation. Through isolation. What happens if someone does not comply? I asked. He exhaled slowly, looking past me this time, not at me. They find a way, he said. No details. No examples. Just certainty. That kind of certainty comes from experience. Not theory. I folded the paper back into my pocket slowly. Everything was lining up now. The missing filing. The repeated presence at closings. The silent neighbors. The pressure system. It was not about expanding jurisdiction. It was about creating the illusion of it until it became real enough to enforce. I looked back at him one more time. Has anyone ever pushed back? I asked. He hesitated longer this time. Then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Once, he said. Just one word. Then he looked away completely. That was the first time he disengaged. And that told me something else. Once, I repeated quietly, watching him turn away like the conversation had already gone too far. That one word stayed in the air longer than anything else he said. Once meant it had been tried. Once meant it had not worked. Or at least not in a way that changed anything. I did not press him again. No point. He had already given me more than he intended. I stepped back onto the porch slowly, the boards creaking under my feet again, and this time I noticed another curtain shift across the street. Different house. Same pattern. Watching without being seen. That detail locked everything into place. This was not just pressure. It was surveillance. Quiet. Constant. I went back inside and closed the door, letting the latch click into place. The sound echoed slightly through the empty house. It felt louder now. More final. I walked straight to the table and spread everything out again. Survey. Exemption. Filing reference. Names. Dates. Patterns. It all connected now. The illusion of authority only works if no one breaks it publicly. That was the key. Not legality. Visibility. I leaned over the table, tracing the timeline again with my finger. 3 years of incomplete filing. Multiple closings with the same witness. Silent compliance across the entire street. That is not coincidence. That is design. I picked up my phone and opened a new document, starting to map it out piece by piece. Not just for myself. For exposure. Every detail had to be clear. Simple. Undeniable. If this stayed private, it would disappear like it always had. That thought settled hard. I moved faster after that. Pulled up the county database again. Screenshots. Timestamps. Cross-references. I documented everything. No assumptions. Just facts. Clean. Verifiable. The kind of record that does not get ignored once it is seen. I paused for a second and looked toward the front door again. Still quiet. But now I could feel it. The weight of the neighborhood pressing in without making a sound. That was their strength. Control without confrontation. I exhaled slowly and went back to the phone, scrolling through contact lists. There was one number I had saved months ago during closing. A local real estate attorney who specialized in land disputes. I had not planned to call him. Not for something this small. But this was not small anymore. I hit the number and let it ring. 1 ring. 2. Then he picked up. His voice was calm. Direct. I explained the situation in short pieces. No extra detail. Just the facts. He did not interrupt. That part mattered. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Not confusion. Recognition. You are not the first to notice this, he said finally. That sentence hit harder than anything so far. Not the first. Which meant others had seen it. Understood it. Maybe even tried to stop it. What happened to them? I asked. Silence on the line for a second. Longer than expected. Then he spoke again. They usually sell, he said. Just that. No explanation. No elaboration. That answer settled deep. Selling is not losing a case. It is leaving before the fight finishes. I looked down at the papers on the table again. Everything clean. Everything clear. And still, people left. That meant the pressure did not come from law. It came from something else. Something persistent enough to make people walk away from property they legally owned. I thanked him and ended the call, setting the phone down slowly. The house felt even quieter now. Like it was waiting. Not for action. For resistance. I walked back to the window and looked out at the same empty street. Same closed doors. Same stillness. But now I knew what it was hiding. This place did not need rules to control people. It needed consistency. And the moment someone broke that pattern, everything changed. I rested my hand against the glass, watching my own reflection for a second instead of the street. That is when I realized something else. If everyone before me had walked away, then staying here was not just a decision. It was a disruption. The decision settled in quietly, not dramatic, not loud, just clear. I was not leaving. That thought changed the pace of everything that followed. I moved back to the table and started organizing the documents again, this time with intent. Not just understanding. Strategy. The difference matters. I stacked the survey, the exemption, the incomplete filing record, and the transaction history in a clean order. Each piece told part of the story. Together, they told all of it. I opened my laptop and started drafting a formal notice. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just precise. Facts only. Dates. References. Legal language where it mattered. I addressed it directly to the association, with a copy marked for the county clerk's office. That detail was important. Visibility changes behavior. I paused for a second, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something about this step felt different. This was not private anymore. That was the point. I kept typing. Line by line. Clear statements. No recorded authority. Improper enforcement. Unfiled boundary claim. Each phrase landed clean. No room to reinterpret. I attached the supporting documents, naming each file carefully. Not just for them. For anyone else who might see it. I leaned back slightly, reading through it once more. No gaps. No assumptions. Just verifiable truth. That was enough. Or it should have been. I hit save, then export. The file name sat on the screen for a second longer than expected. It looked simple. But it was not. I printed 3 copies. The printer hummed low in the background, filling the silence again. Each page slid out slowly, stacking neatly. That sound felt steady. Controlled. I picked up the first copy and placed it into a clean envelope. No markings on the outside. Just a name. Association Board. I did not need to write hers. She would know. I walked to the door again, envelope in hand this time. The handle felt colder than before. Or maybe I just noticed it now. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, letting it click shut. The street looked the same. Quiet. Still. But the feeling had shifted. Subtle. Tense. I could sense it without seeing anything move. I walked down the driveway at a steady pace. No hesitation. No rush. Just movement. The sound of my steps on the concrete carried further than it should have. Or maybe the silence made it louder. I reached the edge of the street and turned toward the small office building at the corner. I had noticed it earlier. HOA office. Glass front. Closed blinds. Clean sign. It looked ordinary. That was the design. I crossed the street, aware of the same unseen eyes behind windows. That had not changed. But something else had. I was not reacting anymore. I was initiating. That difference carries weight. I stepped up to the office door and paused for a second, looking at my reflection in the glass. Calm. Focused. No hesitation. I pushed the door open. The bell above it chimed softly. Inside, the air felt cooler. Controlled. The front desk sat empty for a moment. Then a woman appeared from the back office, stopping short when she saw me. Not surprised. Just cautious. That look again. Familiar. Can I help you? She asked. Neutral tone. Measured. I placed the envelope on the counter between us. This is for the board, I said. Simple. Direct. She glanced down at it, then back at me. Something in her expression shifted. Small. Quick. Recognizing more than she expected. She did not touch the envelope right away. That pause told me everything. This was not routine. Not for them. Not here. She finally reached forward and took it, fingers tightening slightly around the edge. I will make sure they receive it, she said. Polite. Controlled. But there was tension underneath. I nodded once and turned toward the door. No need to stay. No need to explain. The message was already in motion. I stepped back outside, the sunlight hitting harder this time. Brighter. Sharper. The street still looked the same. But it did not feel the same anymore. Not even close. I walked back toward my house, slower now, letting the moment settle. Somewhere behind me, that envelope was being opened. That thought stayed with me as I reached my door again. And for the first time since I arrived, I could feel something shift in their system. The air felt different the moment I stepped back inside. Not quieter. Tighter. Like something had shifted beyond what I could see. I set my keys down slowly and listened. No footsteps. No voices. Just that same controlled silence. But now it carried weight. I moved to the window again, keeping my distance from the glass. The street still looked empty. No cars moving. No doors opening. But I knew better now. This place did not show movement unless it had to. I waited there for a minute longer than necessary. Nothing changed. That was the change. I turned back toward the table and checked my phone. No messages. No calls. Too clean. That was the first sign. When pressure works, it does not start loud. It starts quiet. I sat down and opened my laptop again, pulling up the email copy of the notice I had just delivered. Still there. Still sent. Still clean. But something told me that was not the only copy moving through their system. I refreshed the county portal again, almost out of habit. Same incomplete filing. Same pending note. Nothing updated. That part stayed frozen. But it would not for long. Not after today. I closed the laptop halfway and leaned back in the chair, letting the stillness stretch again. That was when I heard it. Soft. Barely there. A car door closing somewhere down the street. Not loud. Not rushed. Just a single, deliberate sound. I stood up and walked back to the window. This time, I saw it. Linda's white Lexus, parked halfway down the block. Engine off. She was inside. Not moving. Just sitting there. Watching the houses. Not mine directly. The street. That detail mattered. She was not reacting. She was waiting. I narrowed my eyes slightly, trying to see through the glare on the windshield. Nothing clear. Just a silhouette. Still. Controlled. That kind of stillness is not passive. It is calculated. I stepped back from the window slowly, keeping my movements minimal. No need to signal that I had seen her. That would change her timing, not mine. I walked back to the table and picked up the second copy of the notice, running my fingers along the edge of the paper. The texture felt sharper now. Real. Anchored. That document was no longer just a statement. It was a trigger. I set it back down and glanced toward the hallway. Then back to the front door. Every part of the house felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting for the next move. Not from me. From them. I checked the time. Only 20 minutes had passed since I left the office. That was not enough for a formal response. But it was more than enough for internal reaction. That is how systems like this work. Fast inside. Silent outside. I walked to the sink and turned on the water, letting it run for a few seconds just to break the quiet. The sound filled the room, steady and predictable. That helped. It reset the space. I turned it off and listened again. Nothing. Then I caught it. A faint vibration on the counter. My phone. I walked over and looked down. Unknown number. Local area code. That detail alone narrowed the possibilities. I let it ring once more before picking it up. Hello. I said. There was a pause on the other end. Not static. Not confusion. Controlled silence. Then a voice came through. Low. Measured. Not Linda. Not the clerk. Someone else. You should not have delivered that notice, the voice said. No anger. No volume. Just certainty. I did not respond right away. I let the silence stretch again. That part mattered. Then I spoke. Why not? I asked. Simple. Direct. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Then the answer came. Because now it cannot stay quiet anymore. The line went dead before I could say anything else. I stared at the phone for a second, the screen going dark in my hand. That sentence echoed differently than everything before it. Not a threat. Not a warning. A statement. Something already in motion. I set the phone down slowly and looked back toward the window again. The white Lexus was still there. Still unmoving. Still watching. But now it felt different. Not like control. Like pressure building. And for the first time since I arrived, I realized this was no longer just about exposing their system. It was about what that exposure was going to force into the open next. I did not move right away after the call ended. The silence felt heavier now, like the house was holding something it could not release. I looked at the phone again, then set it face down on the counter. That voice was not trying to scare me. It was stating a condition. Something had already shifted. I walked back to the window, slower this time, and focused on the street. The white Lexus was still there, but the engine was on now. I could see the faint shimmer of heat near the exhaust. That was new. She was not just waiting anymore. She was preparing to move. I watched for a few seconds, then the car pulled forward. Smooth. Controlled. It did not speed away. It just rolled down the street and turned the corner without hesitation. No glance back. That part stood out. People who lose control usually look back. She did not. I stepped away from the window and let out a slow breath. The pressure in the room shifted again, but it did not disappear. It spread. I could feel it in the quiet. In the stillness of the walls. In the way everything felt just slightly off balance. I went back to the table and looked at the documents one more time. Same lines. Same clarity. Nothing had changed on paper. But outside, everything was already moving. That contrast settled in deep. I picked up the exemption document and ran my thumb across the seal again. Solid. Verified. Unquestionable. And still, it had not been enough before. That thought stayed with me. I moved to the sink again and filled a glass of water, taking a slow sip while watching the hallway. No sound. No movement. But something told me this quiet would not last. Not after that call. Not after that notice. Systems like this do not collapse all at once. They tighten first. They test. They adjust. I set the glass down and checked my phone again. No new calls. No messages. That part was expected. The next move would not come through something obvious. It would come through pressure. Subtle. Repeated. I walked back to the front door and opened it slightly, just enough to feel the air outside. The street looked the same. Still empty. Still controlled. But now I could see it differently. This was not calm. This was containment. I stepped out onto the porch again, letting the door rest behind me without fully closing it. The wood creaked under my weight, same as before. Same sound. But this time, I did not look around right away. I just stood there, listening. After a few seconds, I caught it. A faint engine somewhere beyond the corner. Not one car. Two. Moving slowly. That detail mattered. I stepped forward just enough to see past the houses. Two vehicles turned onto the street at the same time. Not police. Not marked. Just ordinary cars. But they moved in sync. That was not random. They slowed as they passed my house, not stopping, not lingering, just enough to register presence. Then they kept going. No hesitation. No interaction. Just a message without words. I watched them disappear at the far end of the block, the sound of their engines fading into the same quiet that had been here all day. That was the first real response. Not legal. Not direct. But deliberate. I stepped back toward the door, letting my hand rest on the frame for a second. Everything I had uncovered was real. Everything I had sent was valid. But this system was not built to respond through normal channels. It was built to apply pressure until people stepped back. I could feel that pressure starting now. Slow. Controlled. Expanding. I closed the door behind me and locked it, the click echoing slightly through the house. Not loud. Just enough. I stood there for a second, listening to the silence settle again. Then I looked back toward the table, toward the documents that had triggered all of this. The line on that map was still clear. Still legal. Still mine. But for the first time, I understood something else. Owning the line was one thing. Holding it was something completely different.